Okay. So this is a little bit of a dry subject. You may find yourself sort of going, I don't quite understand the relevance of any of this, and why is this so complicated? Or maybe it's not complicated and it's just, whatever. Um, it. I remember once being in a winter retreat in Plum Village, and Thai was giving a Vietnamese Dharma talk very early in the morning, like, I can't remember, it was 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, but it was early. It was absolutely freezing. And the Dharma talk was in Vietnamese, so I'm getting it through translation, on why is it that we perceive the color purple as purple. That's a very common Buddhist understanding, that people, discuss. Oh, there's the contact, and then there's the perception, et cetera, and eventually we understand this to be purple. So this is like analyzing the mind. And I'm sitting there and I'm shivering. My teeth are knocking against each other. And I'm thinking, I don't really care about the color purple. I only, this has nothing to do with my experience. So hopefully, I can't guarantee, but hopefully you will not feel that way. At least you won't be cold. If you're in your own house, you can control the temperature. But it's hard to know with this subject. And I'll also say that this is not a subject that I've seen explored by others. It's kind of interesting. So Thai has done a number of retreats on Buddhist psychology, specifically from the Yogacara perspective. There was a winter retreat in the mid-90s, I think 95, and maybe even one more, on exploring Buddhist psychology. There have been retreats for psychologists prior, but this was like a whole winter retreat on really exploring the subject. And that's where the book Transformation at the Base comes from. He also did in 1997, he did another retreat pretty much on the same subject, trying to condense it into 5 or 6 days. So within that arena of Buddhist psychology, there is this understanding, there is this list of 51 mental formations. At that point, we knew what a mental formation was. A mental formation is anything that arises in the mind, that gets formed in the mind, like joy, anger, fear, love, compassion, etc., etc. And of course, we always emphasize the mental formation called mindfulness. So we kind of knew what a mental formation was, but then Thai had a unique way of saying things. So sometimes Thai would say something and you would go, oh my God, I need to know what this is. So this is how Thai would talk about the 51 mental formations. And you got this impression, oh my God, I need to figure out these 51 mental formations, because if I do, this is my door to enlightenment. If I could only get a handle on these 51 mental formations and understand which ones are wholesome, which ones are unwholesome, my life is great. If I can only do that. So, but then we never got a list of what the 51 mental formations was. So of course that became like a bigger and bigger thing. It became more and more interesting, even though we didn't know what it was. And then eventually came the era of the internet. And then, of course, all you have to do now is Google it and you can find it. Actually, Plum Village has it on their website too. So information is a lot easier to get. So it's a little less mysterious. So I just found it interesting that that there's been this big mystery about the 51 mental formations, and yet no one's really kind of gone and explored what is this list about, and why is that list composed of these specific 51 mental formations? What does it mean? Now, I'm sure there are such things, in the academic literature on Buddhism and stuff, but in the Dharma, I haven't seen it. I personally haven't seen it, so just to, I'm saying that so you can understand that this is my own personal first attempt to explore it, and this may not work very well. So just bear with it. It's just the nature of these things. So So first of all, let's look, there is, and I may be wrong, but I think that sometimes when we look at the word formation, in Sanskrit, it's samskara. In Chinese, it's sheng. Actually means process, and it's actually part of Thai's name. Tit Nyat Han, Nyat is the same as samskara, is action, is a process. So that, what is a formation? Everything we say is a formation, because that when we say everything is the formation, that is the basis of interbeing, of interdependence. Everything is formed by everything else. So a mental formation is a formation formed by, influenced and formed by everything else. But its classification, it happens to be a mental one, something that's in the mind, as opposed to, say, a flower or a tree that happens to be in the growing world. So a formation is something that is made up of everything else, and everything is a formation, no matter what it is. It's a formation. We're all made of, as we like to say in Plum Village, of the earth and the sun and the rain and the clouds, etc., etc., etc. In that definition, sometimes I think that we're using that definition as a noun, and we're not quite emphasizing the fact that it's actually a verb. I know a formation sounds just like a noun, but what it means is everything is formed. It's a process. It's formed by everything else. We're constantly shifting and moving. That's why we're formed, because we're constantly changing. Okay, so within the concept of formation, there is an action of coming to be and dissolving constantly coming to be and dissolving and changing. So that's an emphasis that I think that sometimes the word itself doesn't, because the word is a noun, we don't put enough emphasis in it. And why does it matter? Why do we want to look at these processes? So let me share the screen for a second, so we can look at that thing that we saw before. Oops. So this comes from the Sutra on the Four Establishments on Mindfulness. And so it says, when my mind is desiring, I am aware, ideally, my mind is desiring. When my mind is not desiring, I am aware my mind is not desiring. I'm aware in the same way concerning a hating mind, a confused mind, a collected mind, a dispersed mind, an expansive mind, a narrow mind, the highest mind, a concentrated mind, and a liberated mind. This is how a practitioner remains established in the process of the mind in the mind, observing the mind from within or from without, or observing of the mind from both within and from without. He remains established in the observation of the process of the coming to be of the mind, or the process of the dissolution of the mind, or both the process of coming to be and the process of dissolution. Or he is mindful of the fact there is mind here, until understanding and full awareness come about. He remains established in the observation, free, not caught in any worldly consideration. This is how to practice observation of the mind in the mind. So this tells us the point of observing the mind, the point of observing all these different factors that can arise in the mind, is so that we can be free of it. We can have a free mind by observing the mind. I can, quote unquote, reach enlightenment. That's really what it's saying. And there's a very similar, within the section on the body in the Four Establishments of Mindfulness, it talks about being aware of the body, being aware of feelings, being aware of the mind, being aware of objects of mind. So those are the four establishments. In the body, there's a very famous section about I want to be aware of my body, saying this is the liver, this is the skin, this is this, these are my nails, this is my hair, these are my eyes. Just like a farmer has a sack of beans, and the farmer can say, oh, these are mung beans, this is rice, these are black beans, these are kidney beans, this is split peas, this is etc. So to be aware of the content, in this case it's the body, but we can take the same metaphor of that bag of beans and apply it to the mind. These are all the seeds that are possible, the beans that are possible. And it's important for two reasons. Number one, so I can see what's around. Number two, if I have mung beans, but my soil isn't good for mung beans, that my soil is good for rice. I don't know how mung beans grow, so I can't say, but I know that rice requires a lot of water. So let's say I know that there's a lot of water in my field, in my soil. I can take the rice grains and seed them, and it's a good match. But if I try and put kidney beans where they don't belong because there's not enough sun or the soil is pH is too whatever, it's not going to work well. So it's not just about knowing what seeds exist in my mind, but also being able to know these seeds interact in a certain way and they grow in certain ways. So that metaphor is very important, to be able to know what seeds I have, what is the potential of the seeds, what the seeds are and what their potential is, including with their interactions with other things. The other thing about this idea of formations, and so sometimes we use the word seed and sometimes we use the word formation. I believe that when, I'm not sure if that's 100% correct. I think that the word seed is more appropriate when we're talking about seeds as potentials in the store consciousness, in the Alaya Vishnaya. When a seed has moved up and manifests in the mind consciousness, it's no longer a seed, it's a mental formation, it's been formed. And then it can go back and become a seed again, but in the store consciousness. But when I'm seeing that, when I use the word formation and I say everything is a formation, all my mental processes are formations or processes, it automatically also implies that all seeds, all mental formations are possible. So even though I might be consumed by say anger or jealousy or something, unwholesome right now, number one, the opposite is always possible, and other seeds are always possible. And the notion of the opposite is also very important, because if X exists, non-X also exists. And we'll see that in the list of these mental formations, that there's always the opposite. So I may have, if X is unwholesome, non-X, which is wholesome, is possible. If Y that is wholesome is there, I have to watch out, because non-Y, which is unwholesome, the opposite of Y, can come in at any point. So it's about guarding the mind, to cultivate the mind. Wholesome is a seed that is, or a mental formation that is going to help me create a spacious mind, versus an unwholesome seed is going to be the kind of mental process that's going to congest the mind. It's going to prevent me from opening up the mind. Now, this list is actually geared towards, I believe it is geared towards a practice that we call right diligence. That's part of the Eightfold Path, right effort or right diligence, whereby, so we say that in our store consciousness, all options exist, as we'll call them sleeping seeds. Okay? The store consciousness just allows all the seeds to be there. They're all potentials, and there's no preference. When a seed is watered and it starts to manifest in the mind consciousness, okay, it starts to grow and it starts to grab more attention. It gets fattened up, by mixing with other thoughts, etc., etc. It starts to interact. Eventually, it will fade away, just like in the meditation. A thought will fade away. No matter how strong a thought is, eventually it goes away. Goes back into the store consciousness, except having been entangling, it's been fed, it's been fattened up as it manifested in the mind consciousness. Now, when it comes back to the store consciousness, it's a little stronger, a little fatter. It's much more likely to pop up again. I've created a groove with that mental formation. So constantly, where seeds come up for us, randomly or unrandomly, and sometimes they just stay for a second in the mind and they disappear, and sometimes they get fattened up and engaged in, and then when they go back to the store consciousness, when they fade, they're a little stronger, they're more likely, they become part of my pattern, part of my personality, part of my consciousness. So right diligence is the practice. It's a fourfold practice, or you can say twofold practice, depending on how you look at it. You can say it's recognizing seeds and cultivating them. That will be a way to take it as a twofold. As a fourfold practice, you say, I recognize wholesome seeds and I water them and I do the best I can, the best effort I can. I'm diligent about allowing that seed to manifest in the mind consciousness for as long as possible. I'm fattening that seed up, making it stronger and stronger in my mind consciousness, make it interact, make it take space, so that when it eventually fades away, which it will be stronger in the store consciousness. So I'm strengthening my wholesome seeds. I also want to recognize the unwholesome seeds. And I want to do the best I can not to encourage them to come up into my mind consciousness. And when they do come up to the mind consciousness, to bring them back, to encourage them, not to fatten them up, not to engage with them, not to make them stronger so they don't create grooves in the mind or patterns in the mind, and bring them back to the store consciousness. So not so much suppression as much as non-encouragement, recognizing, not watering, not encouraging. Whereas with positive seeds, I want to water and encourage. And the method for either all four actions is mindfulness. So interestingly enough, if I embrace a mental formation with mindfulness, if it's positive, it manifests more strongly, it takes more space. If it's an unwholesome mental formation, a negative seed, eventually the mindfulness will calm it down and allow it to fade away more quickly than without mindfulness. And just to recognize that sometimes we say positive seeds and negative seeds, or wholesome and unwholesome, and to just be clear that a positive or negative seed has to do with its effect on the mind. It has nothing to do with whether it's pleasant or not. The distinction between pleasant feeling and unpleasant feeling is not the same as wholesome and unwholesome. That's kind of important because some seeds are negative and they can feel really good. We all know the feeling when, and we may know that it's not good for us, but we still get sucked into it. You're angry at someone and you're letting that anger sort of, we like that anger. We like being able to vent it out. It gives us a certain sense of power, or, at least for a little bit. So pleasant, unpleasant is not the way to judge it. That's why we require the mindfulness, and that's why the list is useful. So the purpose of this list of 51 mental formations, and in a moment we're going to go through the whole list, probably more than once, is to transform the mind, to help us transform the mind so that by allowing us to see what's going on, but at the same time to remember this is not a list of all seeds. This is not a universal list of all seeds. And I'll show you that it's not all the seeds when we go through the list. I mean, there's some very obvious mental formations that are missing. Okay, so there's another agenda here besides just listing seeds. It's not meant to list all the seeds. We can say there's 600 mental formations. We can say there's 4 mental formations. We can say there's any number you like. If you have a mental formation in you, you recognize it, you're working with it, whether it's on the list or not, it's a mental formation. You can make it's part of your list if it's useful for you, for your process, to name it. Okay. Now, some of the mental formations on this list are almost like I can't quite tell the difference between, say, arrogance and pride. It's not always so clear, for example. So some of these mental formations are, there's a lot of subtleties, which of course Buddhists are very good at. This is not supposed to be a complete list. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen in order to for you to be able to see this. On. Where is the share screen? Here it is. Sorry. And whoops, it's not work well. Okay, so it starts with what are called the 5 universal mental formations. Okay, and they're universal because without them, they exist all the time. At all times, there is always some contact with someone, with something, some mental formation. We're paying attention to something, we're feeling something, we're perceiving, and we're thinking of something. So this is constantly happening, and no other mental formation can exist in the mind without being massaged or worked with through these 5 universals. Now, you may notice, if you're into Buddhist lingo, you may notice that this is a little bit similar to the 5 skandhas. It's different, but it's a little bit similar in that there's a process of just touching something, getting it to be activated, and then as it becomes larger, I'm consolidating it. It becomes larger and larger, becoming more consolidated, creates more grooves. So it starts to become part of my consciousness. So in the 5 skandhas, we have feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. First, I just touch the stove and just spontaneously, oh, it's hot. Then I perceive, oh, it's hot. Oh, that's nice heat. Oh, no, that's too hot. Then I have a mental formation about it, past the formation, past the perception, which is, oh, that's really bad. I should take my hand away really fast, or, oh, this is very nice. I should put my hand more. Then I have, it becomes part of my consciousness. Oh, I like this stove. So there's a process of how a mental process gets started and gets deepening. These are what these universal formations are. Okay, so they exist all the time. They're always going to be there. And so this is just an attempt to describe the process of the mind without talking about specific seeds like, say, anger or resentment or love or anything like that. This is the process. Every thought comes and goes and gets consolidated or not. And then we have 5 what are called particular or separate types. They don't exist all the time. They come and go, but they influence the quality of every other seed. Okay, so first I have to touch the seed. I have to have some interest in it. So in other words, I might have smelled something, okay, but I have no interest in it, so it disappears. It's not going to keep going. But if I went, oh, this smell, that's kind of cool. I like that smell. Then a process gets started. So these 5 things are going to influence the quality and the intensity of a mental formation as it happens in my consciousness. And then past that first spark, I have to have I have to release, in order for that mental formation to actually have some space, I have to release all the other ones. So that's determination. I'm determined to engage with this particular mental formation. I have some more interest in it. And I can be mindful of it. Now, I'm giving you the Chinese. In a moment. It will be some of it will be a little bit more interesting, so that we can see it from another perspective. Sometimes the word we use in English, we're just so used to them, we're not fresh about what they actually mean. So now we see, for example, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. We know this trio. This is a trio that comes up all the time in Buddhist understanding. So we've decided that we're engaging with the seed, with a mental formation. We have an interest in it. We're releasing some of the interest in other seeds in order to be with this particular mental formation. And now we're bringing it into the now. And then we have some concentration on it. We concentrate on it, and or we may not concentrate on it, and we might have some insight about it or from it. So this is not a process that goes linearly, and not all 5 of these have to exist at any given time. But any one of these 5 so-called particulars will affect how a mental formation gets interacted or acted upon in my mind. So there, and from now we're going to see wholesome and unwholesome mental formations. Although at the end there's what's called not fixed mental formations, indeterminates. So let's look at the wholesome mental formations. So we see trust, faith. I have to have trust in the teachings, in the practice, or if I have a teacher, faith in the teacher. Otherwise, my mind is not, I'm not going to get to the goal, which is a spacious mind. And then the next 2, the inner shame and shame before others. These are very controversial for Westerners because we associate shame, any kind of shame, as a problem. This is not a wholesome phenomenon for us. Shame is not something we feel is wholesome. So I would look at it a little bit more like, what gives me my compass? What gives me a direction? Inner shame means that I can evaluate my actions and I go, oh, these weren't good. And I have the internal compass to say, this didn't work. So, I can say, oh, I've been humiliated, so to speak. I figured out this doesn't work well. So I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna change. And sometimes other people give us that motivation for change, to understand ourselves. So that's called shame before others. And in the Chinese, you see, it's like the heart sees a ghost, so there's a little bit, gets a little frightened. The motivation came from the outside. And then we have the opposites of the 3 poisons: non-craving. Notice that craving, the reason why the Chinese, it's so useful sometimes to look at why the Chinese translated certain characters is because they put a lot of effort into the translations, and because in the Chinese you can have a word and the way it's written has a whole bunch of connotations. So when we look at what is craving, the wholesome mental formation is not having craving. And greed is literally money now. If you remember the character for now from the previous slide, this is the same character at the top, and then it's money underneath it, or shells used for exchange. So when I want something now, that's craving, that's greed. So not having greed, not having hate. So this is the glare, the kind of when anger takes over and you're glaring, you're totally consumed by the anger, that's hatred. So not having that, not being consumed. And not non-ignorance. Now, some sources list that as avidya, which is, ignorance, non-ignorance, as we know it. This is a little different. And and here it's not, non-stupidity in the Chinese. This is like when I have lots of doubts and I'm constantly having doubts, it becomes a sickness. When I have that sickness of doubt, I cannot have a straight mind. I cannot have a clear mind because I'm constantly doubting. I don't know where I'm going. It's not just doubt about one thing, it's a doubt about my whole direction. And then diligence, which is really the whole point of this, the right effort. So dedicating myself, entering my essence of clearing out my mind consciousness so that so the seeds are strengthened or weakened according to whether they're wholesome or not. in order to create a spacious mind. I have unease is a wholesome formation. This is peaceful. The second character is peaceful. The first character is easy or light, as in fluffy, meaning it's like traveling down a river, like a car moving down or a boat moving down a river. It goes with the flow. It's easy. If the practice is very tight, it's not it's very hard. So that's not so wholesome. So it's wholesome. It creates a spacious mind if the practice is light. And vigilance, meaning I'm not constantly escaping. I'm not constantly moving elsewhere. I'm sticking with it. And equanimity, so which in the Chinese is the process of letting go. Okay? So if I'm letting go, I am not going to I can have equanimity because I'm not attached to any one view. And non-harm, ahimsa. So these are the wholesome mental formations. And just to note that the word wholesome, and this is one of the agendas here, is going to be, these are words that are gentle like a sheep. So one of the things that I'm going to suggest is that I think this list is made up for the purpose of large monastic communities, which is what they had 2,000 years ago when this came up in northern India, so that they can live in harmony. Monastics in a community have to have a certain kind of, let's say, conformity. There has to be a hierarchy and rules. And it kind of has to work that way. Otherwise, things don't go well. So part of the agenda of the 51 mental formations is that it is geared for monastic values. And notice there's no love, there's no compassion, there's no joy. Mental formations, you think it's a Buddhist text. What the hell happened to these three mental formations? How did they disappear? It's very interesting. So, let's take a break for a few minutes, just so that we can kind of digest and just take a little walk because I was sitting for too long. Just 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back. I'll invite the bell. All right. So when we look at these wholesome formations, what we're seeing is this is primarily geared towards creating a spacious mind. Not necessarily, it might be pleasant, but it may not. There's no guarantee that it will be pleasant. It usually is. But this is about creating the tools, what will make the mind more spacious. So that's really the point of it, and also how we make the mind turn towards the teachings. This is a Buddhist text, list, so it is always going to be geared towards using the Dharma, using the Buddha Dharma as the tool for transformation. Okay, so let's look at the unwholesome seeds, and again I'm going to share the screen so that you can actually see them. Okay, so with that, there are actually 26 unwholesome mental formations, and they're called fun now. Fun means it's like the fire in the brain, and now means annoying. So it's something that just like fires up and annoys you. Okay, and 6 of them are considered root-based unwholesome mental formations. And the other 20 are called following unwholesome formations. And they're divided into 3 categories again. We'll look at that in a second. So the 6 root unwholesomes are, these are the things that congest the mind, that take over the mind, so they're not allowing the mind to be spacious and even and easeful. They're the anti-Buddha, let's say, something like that. And the first 3 are the three poisons. the causes of suffering. Craving or attachment, so, I want it now. This is craving, I'm attached to it. Hatred, this is, it's beyond anger. It's when anger has become so strong that it takes over. When I'm glaring at something with anger, nothing else exists in the mind. The mind has no space at all anymore. It's all consumed. And then confusion. Okay, and we looked at this character with non-ignorance, that when I just don't have trust in the Dharma, in the teachings. And then the three others are arrogance, and doubt. Okay, and remember that this doubt is actually inside of confusion, and wrong view. And wrong view, the Chinese loved, they translated very nice. It's a deformed heart, the view of a deformed heart, meaning you cannot set yourself up to see the Dharma. And wrong view is always about, in Buddhist understanding, it's always about wrong view about the Four Noble Truths, about the suffering and the causes of suffering, and the capacity to end suffering. And this is exactly where pleasant and unpleasant, it's different. You want to make sure that you don't think of it as pleasant and unpleasant, because my craving can be very pleasant. So if I get sucked into that and I'm thinking, oh, this is so pleasant, I'm craving it, especially if I happen to get it, then I kind of got sucked into an unwholesome mental formation that eventually is going to prevent my mind from being spacious, even though it was pleasant. And this is often how wrong view arises, because I'm looking at pleasant and unpleasant instead of wholesome and unwholesome. So following these, from these 6, we have the list of the other 20. And they're divided into 10, so-called 10 minor, and 2 middle, and 8 majors. Okay. So here, now you may think these ones don't seem so minor. So you have to remember the major ones may not seem so major to you either. And the reason why it's like that, I believe, is because it's about not so much about the action as much as its effect on the mind. Okay? So these 10, so we have anger and resentment and covering things up and being malicious or annoying and being envious and being selfish or stingy and lying and flattering, manipulating. And usually, often in most texts, desire to harm is actually the last one of this. For some reason, Thai puts that as 9th. So we have pride and desire to harm. So these are all the mental formations that we have that are somewhat related to anger, or our relationships with people, and our disresonance with people. And eventually, if this keeps going, what will happen is we will come to a place where we will want to harm others. So depending on your point of view, this should be major. But you can also say, well, these are ultimate. Yes, these are not good. But they could be temporary. They're not. One can be angry, and then when one lets go, one can actually cultivate the mind towards spaciousness. That's a point of view. I'm not saying that it's always like that, but it's possible. So it's just to understand why these are conceivably, why these are listed as so-called minor. But these are all things to do with my putting myself against, engaging in the world and with others, and what happens when I have anger and resentment and all these things, and eventually it ends up in possibly in actual harm. Then there's the 2 middle ones, which have to do with these 2 shames. Okay, so this really has to do with, am I able to learn? Am I willing to take instructions either from my own compass or from the compass that is being offered to me by others? Okay? And then we have the 8 major ones. And what you can see is these are states of mind. These are not feelings. Like the other ones, the minor ones are a little bit like feelings. So this here, my restlessness. Now, interesting when we look at the Chinese, restlessness is literally, jiaoju is literally to lose the lift, to lose your core, to lose the lengthening of yourself. Okay, so when I lose my core, I lose my compass. What happens? I'm searching everywhere. I'm restless. Okay, so it prevents me from having a focus and having my core. And my core. If I'm a quote unquote good Buddhist, my core would be wanting the Dharma, wanting to practice the Dharma, seeking my enlightenment, seeking my spacious mind. And then droughtedness, which is like the heart is submerged. My heart is dark and it's submerged. Okay, it's like I'm being in a swamp. Okay, so it's hard to have right diligence when I'm drowsy. It's lack of faith. I don't have trust in the Dharma. Therefore, I'm not going to practice right diligence. Okay, or it's being inattentive, or slacking off, being lazy, or constantly negligence, which is constantly escaping, not keeping at it. I'm just moving on to something else. Something else is more interesting, or losing my mindfulness, or having a dispersed mind, distraction. Okay? Or not discerning, not having correct knowledge. Okay? So you can see how, from the perspective of the search for enlightenment, these are major. Now, they're not the roots. The roots are ultimately craving and aversion and ignorance. Okay, plus the arrogance. It's that. So there's 6 of them, but these are more major than the others. Okay, so we just see the classification. Now notice we've gone through all 26 unwholesome mental formations, and notice that there's no fear. It's very odd. A Buddhist text, and fear is like, in the Heart Sutra, you know, because of no attainment, the bodhisattvas, grounded in perfect understanding, find no obstacles for the mind. Having no obstacles, they overcome fear. Fear is a big deal. The non-fear is one of the places we're trying to reach within a spacious mind. That's a sign of a spacious mind. So it's interesting that there is, fear just doesn't come into it here. I don't know why. And fear, by the way, in the Heart Sutra, the word fear, kong, is what binds the heart, meaning it stops the heart. I'm fearful. So you would think that would be something that they would, that the authors of this list would have put in. So again, just to emphasize, this is not a complete list. It's just a tool to help us look at what's in our mind and how to transform, and what we could use. In a second, we'll see some pairs. So we can see, I can use this for this, this for this. And then there's 4 non-fixed ones, or indeterminate. So of which, quite honestly, regret is the one that is the clearest for me. Regret can be a positive thing. Oh, I regret that I did this, and now I will do better. So it's a little bit like shame, inner shame. But regret can be corrosive. I can regret constantly, and then all I'm doing is corroding myself, and it's not useful at all. The other 3, I think they just come from the Indian way of thinking of the time when this was written. So of course there's a mental state of sleep. And of course, sleep can be very good, because sleep can nourish us and heal us. And sleep can be, if there's too much sleep and all we do is sleep, then we're not doing anything. And the next 2, Vitarka and Vichara, always come together in the literature. They're a pair. They don't exist on their own. And they're a little similar when we looked at the 5 universals. They're similar also, that I have to have an interest and then sustain that interest. So there's the initial thought, the initial spark. So I'm seeking, it's more active, and then I have to sustain the thought in order for it to manifest, to keep going. So that's, let me just stop the share. So that's the list. We've basically gone through the list. It's not terribly exciting. It's not, there's nothing spectacular about it. This is not going to get you enlightenment just by looking at the list. What it can do is by using we can use the list to make me more aware of my practice of right diligence. Okay? So that's why we have these pairs. So all the wholesome mental formations have a pair that's unwholesome. And before we do that, I just want to go through a few of these, when I'm looking, and of course it's a list of 51, so there's bound to be one. So you go, I don't know what the hell is this, and why is this one here, and what does this really mean? And I don't know that I can't answer most of these. But we look specifically at this concept of inner shame and shame before others. So, and that's a big one, especially for us. It's because, in Asia, people are a little bit more willing to go with that. So it's really about being conscious of my actions and my thoughts. And am I being conscious of it? Or am I willing, does the motivation come from others, and am I willing to listen? So that's a pair, they come together. And then there's also this is something that's not so easy for me to understand the difference exactly between arrogance and pride. So if you're looking at the Buddhist literature says that arrogance is a puffed up mind. Okay, I'm exaggerating, I'm inflating myself, and it is the base for pride. But then on pride itself, it says that it's self-infatuation. That's the definition. I guess for me, I'm looking at the possibility of arrogance is a mental attitude around my whole mind as a whole, and it's a root-based unwholesome formation. Okay, it's all pervasive, because if I'm arrogant, I'm promoting myself. It's about self-promotion, and therefore the concept of non-self cannot exist. If I'm arrogant, the possibility of non-self it's gone. Pride is about, for me, I see it as a little bit more about I'm proud of a certain action or a certain aspect of me, not the whole thing, not all of me, or it might be all of me, but also pride seeks praise. Praise is dependent. That's why it's one of the so-called minor following unwholesome mental formations, because it has to do with interaction. I'm seeking praise. When I'm proud, I'm looking for other people to tell me, yeah, you're really good, you're really cool, you did well. That's what pride, I believe, is. I can't see it in the etymology in the Chinese, especially since, well, the arrogance is actually slightly problematic to begin with in the Chinese, because that's not the word for arrogance. It's a combination word. It's part of a combination that means arrogance. So it's quite problematic. And then we looked at hatred and anger. That anger, kroda is in the Chinese is like the heart is divided. Okay, I am I'm divided between my interests and your interests, and there's a contradiction, and therefore I'm angry at you because you're not supplying my interests. I have certain needs and you're not giving them to me, so my heart is divided. I'm preferring my interests. This is anger. I'm putting myself above you. Okay. Hatred is when I start glaring and the mind is totally consumed. So there's a slight difference between anger and hatred. And then we also looked at confusion and doubt, or ignorance and doubt, that doubt is kind of like, I have doubt, but in ignorance or in confusion, I'm constantly having doubt. I don't trust anything. within myself. Okay? So I can't have a good path. So now let's look at the wholesome formations. And because remember, the point of if there is seed X, there's also the possibility of non-X or the absence of X. So if X was a positive mental formation, then non-X will be a negative formation. And if, say, Y is an unwholesome mental formation, then non-Y, the absence of Y, is a wholesome formation. So we're not going through the whole list again, but we're going to do that. We're going to repeat quite a few of them again. So let's look at that for a second. So just again, because I just think that when you see it in writing, oops, okay, here we are. Okay, so most of 8 of the wholesome formations, these are on the left, have very clear opposites because they're using the same word with a no. Okay, so it's very easy. Sometimes the word in Chinese is bu, and which means no, and sometimes it's wu, which means having no. Okay, that's so if you kind of look at the characters, you can see it, but either way, it's the same thing. So having trust or not having trust, having inner shame or not willing to have inner shame, willing to listen to others, the shame before others or not. And the next 3 are actually it's the craving, hatred, and confusion, and the non-craving, the non-hate, and the non-ignorance are the wholesome. So here the no happens to be on the side of the wholesome. And then diligence, which is actually expressed as the opposite of negligence. Okay, so it's not negligence as it happens, and non-harm, not harming, harming being the unwholesome and non-harm being the wholesome. Then we have 3 more wholesome mental formations, which don't have a clear yes, no to them, opposite that comes with the word no. So ease, which is flowing peacefully and easefully, versus restlessness. I've lost my core and I'm going all over the place looking for a focus. Okay. And diligence, actually, well, any unwholesome mental formation is basically the result of non-diligence. Because if I have an unwholesome mental formation that has sprouted in the mind consciousness, in the living room consciousness, it means that my diligence hasn't caught up to it. It quote unquote failed. But the more obvious ones are, it can be paired as opposites with drowsiness, possibly with sleepiness, laziness or distraction, but lots of others. But the point is that, so when we're looking at the opposite, we're looking, can one remedy the other? And equanimity, the capacity of letting go, we can pair again with any mental formation that's agitating, that's unwholesome, because at that point we can't let go. The moment we can't let go, something else takes over the mind. We don't have equanimity in the mind. We're not going to have an easeful, spacious mind. Any mental formation that's agitating is going to be the opposite of equanimity. And perhaps, at least in my mind, arrogance and pride are sort of the ones that, when I'm arrogant, when I'm proud, this is when I want to judge, because equanimity is the opposite of judgment. So those are the pairs that we see clearly from the 11 wholesome formations. So we're giving the opposite, what is positive and what is negative, and they come in clear opposites. So we can work with them. And then we have some more pairs that don't come, that are not related to the wholesome mental formations. So for example, we have mindfulness, which is one of the 5 particulars, and forgetfulness, which is one of the unwholesome, one of the 20 unwholesome following wholesome mental formations. Particularly, it's considered a major one of the 8 major following secondary. And then we have non-discernment. Okay, because if it has none, what is the yes to it? Okay, this is again a major major secondary unwholesome mental formation. And I think it can be paired with either insight, which is literally sweeping. These are two brooms above the heart. When I sweep the mind, I have insight. Or by character, you can see that the character in the middle of non-discernment, that character appears in concentration. When I'm concentrated or when I have insight, I can make good discernment. So though this is an implied pair, and we already saw that doubt and ignorance is, it's paired, so therefore it's paired with non-ignorance, because ignorance itself is like constantly having doubt. I'm not trusting the path of practice. And so we saw that all 11 wholesome mental formations have clear opposites. Not all unwholesome formations have clear opposites. Okay, so that's so if you're looking for an opposite as a medicine, just go for mindfulness. That's your safe bet. Craving, hatred, and confusion have clear opposites. Arrogance, doubt, and wrong view. So arrogance, we can say can go with equanimity. Doubt goes with no ignorance, and wrong view will go with insight. So we have basically gone through the whole list of 51 mental formations. And I don't know if it was useful. I don't know if you were sitting there chattering your teeth going, what the hell do I care? So this is really, it's like, and especially when you're being told, and by the way, here are the big mental formations in the Buddhist world, like love, compassion, joy, fear, and they're not even in here. So then the question is, what were they trying to why did they compile this list? What was the point? So you can say maybe the fact that fear or non-fear are not in here, love and compassion are not here, that they are trying to give us a list or a sample list to work with in order to create the mind of love, the mind of compassion, or the mind of non-fear. That's, I'm just taking it from the fact that it isn't there. But I think the way they would have phrased it, they would have said, this is a list to help us direct ourselves, to set our compass towards full, right, and universal enlightenment. Okay? It is not all that different than saying the mind of love, the mind of compassion, the mind of non-fear. Now, the Chinese would not, Tai says full, right, and universal enlightenment. He's translating straight out of Sanskrit. The Chinese, interestingly enough, decided not to do that. They left it in Sanskrit and they just make a bunch of characters to make it, they transliterated it, basically, by sound. So they're leaving it as Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This is the goal of practice. Full and absolute, unequaled, unparalleled, uncomparable enlightenment, where the mind is totally spacious, does not congest, and it sees all possibilities, all causes and conditions. It is said the myth of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree is in the third watch of the night. The Buddha understands all causes and conditions he understood all causes and conditions of within himself, according to the story, when in the second watch of the night, whatever these watches of the night are, I don't know, it's an Indian term. And in the third watch of the night, he understands all causes and conditions of the entire universe. That is Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. That's complete enlightenment. That's what we're trying to get to. And this list that can seem very dry and very boring is meant to give us one more tool, one more door, one of the so-called 84,000 Dharma doors. It's an option to use to reach a spacious mind. So So I would like to try and do a contemplation on these that's going to be a little bit more practical, if that's okay, unless people need a moment of a break. It's up to you. No. All right. So I need to get the microphone in for the bell. Just don't use it as formal meditation. Don't get too overly upright here. And you can actually use a pen and paper if you like. It's going to be somewhat quick, and just to look at this list of wholesome and unwholesome mental formations. We already looked at the process, the first 10. We looked in the beginning meditation, how something comes to be in the mind, how something grows in the mind. And now we're just going to go through the list of wholesome and unwholesome mental formations, but look at it, how they exist in me, giving ourselves just some time to digest it and look at what happens in my own mind. So, and I'll have them on the screen as we go through them because it's just convenient, to have these things. So give me a second, and we just have to go back. Okay. So looking at the role of wholesome formations within me. Do I have trust in the teachings? Trust in the practice? And if I have a teacher, do I have faith in the teacher? How do I self-correct? How do I set up my compass? How do I let go of anger, hatred, doubt, and confusion? How do I cultivate ease within me? And at the same time, keeping the work of transformation, not slacking, not letting loose, and developing my equanimity, my capacity to let go of attachment, letting go of attaching value to all things that I see, and cultivating nonviolence. And looking at my unwholesome formations, the 6 root-based unwholesome mental formations, noting my cravings, the desire to have it now, noting anger and hatred. When does the glare of anger come up in me? and takes over the entire space of my mind. Looking at confusion. What happens when doubt arises? When I'm not sure? Do I make things up? What triggers suspicion in me? When do I indulge in my own value, my own importance? And can I let go of views? When do I lose openness? How does the anger arise in me? When are my heart's loyalties split between me and others? And looking at the many ways I lose the integrity, the clarity of my heart through resenting, covering, or pretending, in being jealous or annoying others, being selfish or stingy, deceiving, flattery, or manipulating, wanting praise. And how does it all culminate in wishing harm? And looking at the two middle secondary unwholesome formations within me, do I listen to my compass? Do I reject it? Do I care to correct course through what others tell me? Or do I reject it? And looking at the 8 major secondary unwholesome formations, looking at all the states of mind that prevent me from expanding, that rob me from ease, space, and openness, my restlessness, losing my core, looking for things to hold me up, drowsiness, the state in which my heart is dark and I feel submerged, lack of trust in the Dharma, slacking off, My heart is not directed, not motivated. My mind wanting to be idle and seeking escape, being forgetful, scattered, not discerning. These all prevent me from developing mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And contemplating what is full, right, and universal enlightenment. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi.